I never thought that putting up a simple no parking sign would spark an all-out war with my neighborhood HOA or that their entitled president would drag my small business into a mess of lies that had been festering for years. How could I have known that towing their cars would unravel the truth and finally bring justice not just for me, but for every business in our district? It all started on a Monday morning that already felt off. I slammed on the brakes, my heart jumping into my throat as I nearly plowed into a silver Lexus parked squarely in my reserved spot. Confused and irritated, I circled the lot. 3 unfamiliar vehicles filled our limited company parking area, and I could feel my blood pressure spiking. I'd been running my tech consulting firm Summit Logic for 5 years out of this building, and never once had I seen outsiders using our lot. After circling twice with no luck, I resigned myself to street parking, grumbling as I fed coins into the meter. This was not how I wanted to start my week. Inside, Tanya, my office manager, stood by the window looking exasperated. "There's nowhere for anyone to park," she said as I set down my laptop bag. "Lucas and Renee are circling the block." I followed her gaze to the lot. "Any idea whose cars those are?" "Nope," she replied, handing me a cup of coffee. "But I did notice a new property management sign over by the fence. Might be worth calling." Sure enough, the sign belonged to Alder Ridge Property Management. I called and was transferred to a guy named Rick who sounded like he'd rather be doing anything else. "Oh yeah, that'd be Willow Bend Estates," Rick said casually after I explained the situation. "They're repaving their guest parking area this week. HOA board said residents could use your lot temporarily." I nearly choked. "Nobody asked my permission." Rick paused. "Huh. That's odd." Margaret Baxter, the HOA president, said she had an arrangement with the business owner. "Well, I am the business owner," I said, barely containing my anger. "And there is no such arrangement." Rick promised to look into it, which I knew was code for do absolutely nothing. So I printed out a dozen polite notices: private property, Summit Logic, employees only. Please find alternate parking. Thank you for understanding. I tucked one under each windshield wiper. By lunchtime, my employees were fuming. Several had gotten parking tickets. I offered to reimburse them, though it was going to cost me nearly $200. "Maybe we should just tow them," Lucas muttered, biting into his sandwich. "Let's try the nice approach first," I said, though my patience was rapidly thinning. The next morning? Even worse. Not 3, but 7 cars now filled our lot, all with Willow Bend HOA permit stickers. My notes from the day before? Crumpled on the ground. One had a handwritten reply: "The HOA said it's okay." That was it. I drove to the gated community next door. Willow Bend Estates was a pristine cluster of luxury townhomes. The security guard wouldn't let me in without an appointment, but he gave me Margaret Baxter's phone number. "I'll be in meetings all day," she said breezily when I called. "Can this wait?" "No," I said sharply. "Your residents are taking parking spaces my business needs. Clients canceled appointments yesterday because they couldn't find parking." She sighed like I was bothering her. "Fine." 10 minutes at 3:30. I spent the rest of the day digging through property deeds and city records. My building's deed clearly showed that the parking lot was exclusive to our address. At 3:25, I arrived at their community clubhouse. Margaret Baxter was every bit the stereotype: mid-50s, perfect blonde highlights, designer clothes, and a tight smile. She gestured for me to sit across from her desk. "I understand there's been some confusion," she began. "There's no confusion," I shot back. "Your residents are using my private parking lot without permission." Margaret tilted her head. "You need to understand our situation. We have 82 homes and nowhere to park during repaving. We're neighbors, surely you can accommodate us temporarily." That they had been watching my property made my skin crawl. "How long is temporary?" 3 weeks, she replied sweetly. I laughed in disbelief. "That's not happening. I can't have my clients and staff fighting for spaces for 3 weeks. "Well," she leaned forward, "the previous owner allowed us to use the lot sometimes. We're simply continuing that arrangement." This was news to me. I'd bought the building 2 years ago and no such agreement had ever been disclosed. "Show me the agreement," I said. She shuffled some papers. "I don't have it on hand, but I assure you it exists." Reluctantly, I agreed to let them use 5 clearly marked spaces for 1 week just to avoid escalating things. Margaret beamed like she'd won a prize. That night, I sent a formal letter to Margaret and Alder Ridge confirming the temporary agreement in writing. 5 spots, 1 week. The next morning, 15 cars. Every space, including my reserved one. My notes from before were gone, trampled, or ignored. I called Margaret, furious. We agreed to 5 spots for 1 week. I communicated that, she said smoothly. Perhaps some residents misunderstood. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a blatant violation of our agreement. Well, she said, voice dropping into a condescending tone, technically there's nothing you can do. As I mentioned, the previous owner gave us permission years ago. Show me the document. I'll have our secretary send it tomorrow. In the meantime, try to be neighborly. That night, I went to the county records office. Nothing. Not a trace of any parking easement or agreement. I tracked down the previous owner, Mr. Coleman, now retired in Arizona. When I explained the situation, he chuckled. Margaret tried the same nonsense with me. I told her no. There's no agreement. Armed with that, I contacted 3 towing companies. Only one was willing to get involved, given the potential drama. They told me I needed to post signage 24 hours in advance, so I ordered signs that night. Private property, unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. The towing company posted them before dawn. I sent another email to Margaret and Alder Ridge. There was no agreement and unauthorized vehicles would be towed starting Wednesday. 20 minutes later, Margaret called, her voice laced with venom. You're making a mistake. We have legal standing. Then show the document. I don't appreciate your hostility. Our residents will be very upset. They should be upset with you. You misled them. I'm on the city development board, she said. Messing with me could be complicated for your business. I took a deep breath. Are you threatening me, Margaret? Because I'm happy to report any such behavior to the ethics committee. She was silent for several seconds before hanging up. Wednesday morning, I parked on the street with my coffee and watched. Residents started showing up just after 7:30. A man in scrubs. A woman in a business suit. A young mom. By 8:30, the lot was full. At 9 o'clock sharp, the tow trucks rolled in. Within 45 minutes, every unauthorized vehicle was gone. My employees parked without hassle for the first time in days. I let the angry calls go to voicemail. Margaret showed up at 10 o'clock, her luxury SUV screeching into the lot. She stormed into my office. You had no right. I had every right, I said, calm and prepared. Would you like to see the property deed? She raged about missed medical appointments and kidnapped vehicles, but I stayed firm. I showed her the deed, the survey, and the lack of any easement. I also mentioned bluffing that I had recordings of her threats. Her face paled. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want you to tell your residents the truth. I want a signed acknowledgement from your board that no parking agreement exists. And I want no further harassment. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. If I see another car in my lot, I'll report your threats to the ethics committee. She left quieter than she came in. Later that week, Robert Langston, the HOA's vice president, reached out. We met for coffee, and he admitted Margaret had never brought the parking issue to the board. She had a long history of overreach and shady decisions. I played him my real recording of her threat. His face turned to stone. Would you come to our emergency board meeting? The following night, I sat in front of the Willow Bend HOA board and nearly 50 residents. Margaret tried to defend herself, but the recording sealed her fate. She was removed as president, and an ethics inquiry was opened. Monday morning, for the first time in weeks, my parking lot was empty, peaceful. I received a letter from Robert, now acting president, formally apologizing and confirming alternative arrangements for their residents. Even better, several neighboring business owners reached out. They'd been bullied by Margaret too. Together, we formed a small business alliance. A few weeks later, Margaret quietly resigned from the city development board. As I stood outside, coffee in hand, I realized this wasn't just about parking. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't just protect your business, it helps others find the strength to do the same. At the next HOA meeting, I was invited as a guest of honor. Robert handed me a formal agreement, signed by the entire board, outlining our boundaries and a process for future concerns. We hope this marks the beginning of a better relationship, he said. I smiled as I took the document. I'd like that very much.